Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Can You Hear Me, now known as Can You See Me podcast. My name is Fatima Khan-Shah and I am proud to be the West Yorkshire Inclusivity Champion. Now today we're going to be talking about the power of lived experience, which for me is a really personal topic because my whole journey into leadership in health and care and now into the Combined Authority started with someone harnessing the potential of my lived experience to lead change. And I think it's an incredibly powerful subject, not talked enough, I think, but we're going to change that today with this incredible panel. And on my days have I got a belter of a panel for you. So I'm going to start with one of my role models, known as Pam Sian, who is a Unison branch convener and one of the first ever trade union members that I've ever met of a diverse heritage in a really challenging role. So Pam, do you want to just say a little bit about the role that you do? Because people might be on this call going, what is a convener? What is Unison? What is all that? Talk us through what it is.
Hi, thanks, Fatima. So trade union, our role is to ensure that there's fairness in the workplace, comply with legislation, and ensure that all employment rights are adhered to. And everybody has a right to join a trade union or not join, whichever is your choice. I mean, obviously, I'd prefer everybody to be in the trade union movement. We're here to fight your causes. You've got your weekends, your paid holidays, maternity leave, paternity leave, to name a few, because of the trade union movement. So in the Combined Authority, we have a branch called the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Transport branch of Unison, and Unison is one of the biggest public sector trade unions. We have 1.3 million members, with 80% of them being females.
Wow.
Yeah, so quite a big trade union. We are the biggest trade union, in fact, for public sector workers, and we represent a range of people from local government, health, in schools. We do transport, in water, environment, transport, which is our service group that we are in the Combined Authority. So in community sector, a range of sectors that we cover.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
and I have a team under me in the branch. I'm afforded full-time release, and I have a team, and I work with management at the Combined Authority, and look at the policies to make sure that they're right and fit for purpose, and various things within the organisation.
So it's a really influential role, and I didn't say at the beginning that you are somebody who covers the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and one of my fabulous esteemed colleagues. But there are obviously other trade unions available, and we would always encourage people to explore, what their proper appropriate trade union is, and to find out a little bit more, because actually, like you say, they really influence positive change, and there's an opportunity for anyone, if they wish to do so, to join a trade union. And keeping with the West Yorkshire vibe, I'm going to come to the incredible Kate Hainsworth, who is currently the Chief Executive of Leeds Community Foundation. But the reason why I know Kate in particular was because she's done some amazing work on the agenda of diversity and inclusion, and she was one of the founding individuals of the amazing Fair Work Charter. So Kate, welcome to our Can You Hear Me, Can You See Me podcast. Do you want to say a little bit about your work with Leeds Community Foundation, and also a little bit about the work that you've done on the Fair Work Charter? And if you haven't heard of the Fair Work Charter, where have you been? Go and Google it. Not right now, after the podcast.
Thanks, Fatima. That's such a lovely introduction. Yes, I'm Kate Hainsworth, and very privileged to have worked across Leeds and Bradford and West Yorkshire for some years now. So in terms of the day job, my role has been to lead a community foundation, which not everybody knows what they are, but it's a bit like, in a sense, it's a bit like the collective action that Pam was talking about, but it's working really closely with community organisations, and basically the philanthropists that we're trying to channel money towards those community organisations. So if you think about it a little bit like cooperative marketing and fundraising, that's effectively what a community foundation does. And we're really enjoy working with people who do have a little bit to give back, and are prepared to do so to their local area. And we work really closely with them to build their philanthropy journey so that they get a really good connection with what's happening locally. But most importantly, we prioritise what communities need, because we're listening really hard to what communities need and ensuring that they are leading that work rather than it being imposed upon them. So that's the sort of fundamentals of the day job. In terms of the diversity work, Fatima, you're absolutely right. Again, it's been my privilege to work across that piece. Clearly, there's certain elements of my own experience which have had some kind of experience, but there's an awful lot that haven't. And my job has really been to try and channel the voices and the experiences of others, which isn't an easy job either. Did that at the local enterprise partnership and worked very closely with the Combined Authority on that, and was very pleased to work with colleagues on that who I hope have built a bit of a platform for the work that you're doing, Fatima, which is absolutely great to get that proper diversity champion role, which is so visible and great. And then finally, yeah, in terms of the Fair Work Charter, there's a number of charters that are around there and out in the world, and probably a lot of us have wrung our hands and thought, why on earth do we need another charter? Is it going to be something that's just going to be stuck on the wall or put on a dusty shelf and forgotten about? And I'm so proud that the work that we've been able to do with the Mayor and with a really brilliant group of a steering committee, very diverse steering committee, has meant that we've really challenged why we're creating this, what it's for, and exactly what the difference it's going to make. And so the Fair Work Charter that we've managed to bring together it's absolutely not about jumping over hurdles and virtue signalling. It's absolutely about taking as many people as we can, many employers as we can, on an incredibly inclusive journey from wherever they are at. So it's not passing judgment on where people are at, but when people come on board with that charter, there's a journey to go on, a whole lot of friends to help them on the way, and a whole lot of brilliant case studies and examples to show them, as well as some temptations and lures to get them to do more training and to invest more in their staff and give their employees the kind of standards and experience that every employer wants to do and sometimes finds it difficult to do. So hopefully that will be a really exciting path.
It is, and we're gonna delve a little bit more on the journey of the Fair Work Charter during this conversation. But what I will say, and let's be really clear about this from the onset, Kate, is this is not a remix of an original song. This is something that is new, different, and innovative, and will lead the change. So I'm saving the best till last on my introductions, and this lady has thankfully foregone the restraining order that she put in place because I was harassing her so much, because she's just such a fountain of knowledge and wisdom. Professor Donna Hall, I mean, just Google the woman. She's done so much incredible stuff. But she is one of the founding individuals of the Wigan deal, which is an absolute exemplar of harnessing the power of lived experience to lead change in a really complex footprint, engaging and integrating both the local authorities and different communities, which we're going to explore a little bit today. But you're also doing some amazing stuff working with integrated care systems on their journey of harnessing the power and potential of working across a number of sectors and the power of integration to improve outcomes for people. But I could never do an intro that does you justice, Donna. So you're going to have to introduce yourself.
Oh, that's really nice. Thanks, Fatima. And it's lovely to be here today. Thanks very much for the invitation. Always lovely to spend time with you, and I love the podcast that you've done. So yeah, my background is local government, and kind of 40 years in local government altogether. The last job that I had in local government was at Wigan, but worked in all different types of councils, mainly in the north of England. Started at Leeds City Council. That was my first ever job. I love Leeds. So yeah, really fond place in my heart, West Yorkshire, and I think the work you're doing, Fatima, is fantastic. So yeah, Wigan deal with it wasn't just about a strategy, as Kate said before, gathering dust on a shelf. It was about a relational model of working with citizens, thinking about citizens as assets rather than units of need that we need to service, and it was around closing the healthy life expectancy gap between the most deprived and the least deprived in the borough. And we managed to add an additional 7 years of healthy life expectancy in the most deprived parts of the borough, right the way through austerity, because we believed in the community and the community and voluntary sector, and we invested in them. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the answer is in the data, isn't it, of the power of that collaboration and its impact. I mean, there were a couple of things that you've all said in the introduction that I want to explore with you a little bit more. Part of it was just the journey that you've all been on and the authentic leadership that you've demonstrated in using your privilege and influence to give a voice to others to co-create change. And when we talk about co-creating change, that's hard because you have to give power back to individuals, which comes with risk, but also it's unpredictable and people are coming from different perspectives, with different emotional experiences and possibly experiences of trauma, which they're sharing with you. And that can be really hard and can create an emotional load that is difficult to navigate. So I suppose I'm going to come to you first, Kate, because I want to explore a little bit about the journey of the Fair Work Charter and some of the challenges that you went on to do something that wasn't a remix of another song, that did harness the lived experience of people, but also brokered the realism of creating something that would deliver the change. Because part of navigating lived experience to deliver meaningful change is recognizing that you can't give everyone what they want. You've got to reach a consensus and develop the art of compromise, haven't you? So tell us a little bit about that.
Thanks, Fatima. You're absolutely right. It is about the art of the possible, and making that a positive rather than some kind of watered down version of aspiration. So it might just be useful to wind back to the beginning of the process. We'd sort of launched with quite a bit of fanfare, and then there was a pause of okay, we need to assemble the right people around the table to have this conversation. And the Combined Authority team did a brilliant job. James Flanagan, I want to mention, he did a fantastic job reaching out to a whole diverse spread of people. And people did answer the call. So there was a sense of a certain amount of optimism that people were prepared to be in the room. And the people that were in the room in our first meeting were basically sitting on polar opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of their attitude towards this piece of work. We had people in there from the unions, as I've mentioned, brilliant to get their voices in there, but very strong, powerful voices, unionized voices, trained and so on, but also people in the room who were not really trained in terms of speaking up, but their voices were trying to represent communities at a grassroots level. So we've got a variety of authentic voices. And in terms of employers, we had people from the CBI and from the Chambers of Commerce, from the Federation of Small Businesses. So very much holding the space for employers, with quite a very different view to the unions and the communities who were trying to represent the voice of employees. And one of the first exercises we did was actually to ask people to go to which end of the room they felt most comfortable answering a particular question, and literally the room divided. So it was a kind of visible, okay, that's where we are, that's where we started from. So it was definitely a kind of, this is not going to be a quick conversation. This isn't going to be something we can unpack really swiftly. But actually, by holding the space for people to express themselves and express the things that they needed to say so that they were properly heard, by people who were whose experiences was so different, it actually created a sense of generosity within the room, which allowed people to share and overshare. And not that, sorry, overshare sounds like a bad thing, but actually it was important to get the context around why people were saying, no, we can't live with that. Because as you say, Fatima, you bring so much to a position, to an attitude, to a set of beliefs that are way beyond, you know, their fundamental lived experiences, that some of which you've created yourself, but some you've had imposed upon you by society and by the circumstances in which you've developed. And that needed to be heard. That needed to be heard in the room. Now, in terms of what you could see as quite a functional process, that sounds like a very indulgent amount of time. But what we were able to do, and again, I want to pay absolute tribute to Tom Chigbo, who led a lot of the workshops around this, did an amazing job. A lot of the exercises that he brought to the room allowed people to explain why. And I think as soon as people started to understand why, there was a realization that it wasn't about being argumentative or stroppy, that anybody was saying the things that they were saying. There was an understanding that people were trying. They were moving along a journey. They were trying, and with that intention, a lot of things become more possible. The number of calls that I had after our sessions with individuals who were grateful for the opportunity to share, but also who needed to share the burden of what it cost them to share. And I think that's really something that's so important for us to remember, how exhausting it is particularly for individuals who are being asked to represent a whole community, or, you know, speak up for all people of color, or, you know, these enormous kind of responsibility on an individual who never signed up for that. You know, their willingness to participate was to try and bring something to the table, but then being asked to or feeling that they're being asked to shoulder that enormous responsibility, and the sense of that they weren't good enough to do that, that there was some kind of imposter syndrome, that they were being asked to speak on behalf of a nation. And I think that's something that, while the work must be done, and collectively we must ensure that it's supported and done, there's something about resourcing it sufficiently so that people have a safety net, they have somewhere to go, and they have some space to be able to share the additional burden, because it's hard. Yeah.
I mean, so firstly, as a woman who always overshares, I don't think that is a bad thing, as long as it's done appropriately and with support, she says. But there's so much in what you said that I think we need to explore a bit further. I mean, the first thing is, when you're wanting to do true co-production, you got to really think through what exactly it is that you're asking for. And are you really prepared for what you're going to get when you ask that question?
Yeah.
You know, and then there's the other element of the sense of expectation. So as a woman who I believe has got one of the most challenging jobs, which is to advocating for inclusion for everyone, there is a sense of expectation that you are going to fix everything. But I don't speak for everyone. In fact, I don't speak for anyone. My job is to be a conduit to them and to give them a platform to speak for themselves. Because I always used to say to particularly community leaders, listen, I don't need you to speak for me. I can talk for myself. I just need to be where someone can hear me. But the emotional load and expectation that comes from advocates of equality, from their constituents, for want of a better phrase, is really significant. And that comes with emotional load that we need to think through when it comes from a pastoral support perspective. And then the other bit that you described, which is this was such a large scale, complex piece of work. that actually sometimes requires a development of capability to enable people to effectively contribute. So when you're doing that co-production journey, actually there are so many lessons that people can take from this, I think, Kate, that you framed beautifully of, if you're going to do this, you need to think of these elements first before you even start the journey. But the fact that you navigated it, that people were able to speak so freely in psychological safety, that they felt that they did influence positive change, and you got to where you got to, shows that this is possible if it's done
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And another lady that's managed to get it right is Donna. And, you know, I can see lots of parallels, I suspect, from what Kate's described for the journey that you've been on. But I really wanted to explore a little bit with you, one, the sense of expectation, because I don't think you started with an expectation of creating the Wigan deal, but there was a challenge within society, within the system that you needed to resolve. So just talk us a little bit through of the journey and also how you navigated some of the similar issues that Kate's just described.
Yeah, it's a really, really great question. That thanks, Fatima, and brilliant what you've done, Kate. It's lovely to hear. I've not heard that in that much detail before, so it's brilliant. Well done. So I think going back, it's a long story, this one, and I think the kind of good thing about it is its stickability as a strategy. Strategies are useless if they don't bring about kind of lasting change in the way we work with people, I think, and addressing inequalities and unfairness. So it was around a relationship. It described the deal was like the symbol was a shaking hands, two hands shaking, and it was about, look, we're in this together. This isn't about one organisation or one system describing a set of things it's going to do to you as a citizen. This is about a partnership. It's about how we can work together to improve a place that we live in or we work in together, and make it better for everyone by doing things together. So that's unusual for a strategy to do that. And I think that was the starting point, really. And we started it off, it's funny this, with household waste recycling. So we were rubbish at recycling in Wigan. We were like the worst in the north of England. And I think it was something ridiculous, like 12% of household waste was recycled. So we knew we had to do something quite dramatic, and it's really expensive to, as well as being terrible for the environment, to dig holes and put rubbish in it. So we thought, right, let's try and work together and try and get beneath the skin of why this is happening. So working with groups of residents who weren't recycling at all and finding out why that was. And then, so we tried to think about how do we actually work differently with families where there isn't any recycling going on. And we found that the superpower was through children. Because children had like this real insight of worrying about the environment, and so we worked intensively with children, who then kind of infected families with this recycling thing. We also linked it to money, so we froze council tax for 8 years altogether, and on the side of the bin wagons was, this year we're increasing your council tax by 0% because you've been recycling more. So it was a kind of thank you and recognition and a relationship that, because we're together, working together, we weren't just trying to do things to people without listening to people and understanding why and the reality of their lives. Very often we just design services thinking that's what people want. We commission things in an ivory tower, which we've no idea if people actually A, want it, B, need it, or if it's based on the reality of their lives. So one example was sexual health services in Wigan. We've completely redesigned it in partnership with the people who use the services, particularly young people, where we'd put the previous sexual health service was right in the heart of the borough, next to the market, where you might bump into your mum and dad when you were going in. You know, that's the kind of basic thing that if you were designing it with a young person, there is no way you would do that. You know, we weren't using social media, we weren't using text messaging as a way of reminding people about appointments. It was all letters through the post, you know, God knows who might pick it up. So I think just by listening to people, we can actually co-create much better services that are much more effective. I don't know if you've come across an organisation called Care Leaders. care leaders, but they're a social enterprise set up. I think they're a community interest company run by and with people employed who are care leavers. So they've been in the care system at some point, and they kind of help to train social workers on how to redesign their systems to be much more effective to support people in the care system. Because we've just historically developed this risk-averse set of things that we do, hugely expensive and very often ineffective. We worked out in Wigan between £250,000 and £500,000 per year per family on a limited number of families, on assessing them, repeatedly assessing them, not helping them one bit. And at the end of the year, they were either in the same or a worse position than at the beginning. And collectively, through criminal justice, the NHS, the council, social care, primary care, you name it, we'd abused it. We'd let people down, repeatedly let people down over generations by doing this. So, we've got to stop just assessing people and seeing people through the lens of our own little unit of need criteria with eligibility criteria. Go away, get worse, come back when you're worse, and then we can help you. So we completely supported that.
There's so much in there. I think we could just do a whole podcast on the Wigan deal. I might come back to you on that, Donna. But there were a few things that I think are some really great learning and link beautifully to what Kate just described. The first one is the concept of appreciative inquiry. So if you get dissent, instead of going, I don't agree with you, I think this is completely wrong. And we've lost that ability to agree to disagree, haven't we? Which I think, again, we might want to explore in a different conversation. But that curiosity, that appreciative inquiry of, so how have you got to where you've gotten to? Why have you got that conclusion? Well, let's talk about your thinking there, I think, is so important. But it's a real skill. And there's something about how do we develop capability in our organisations to do that, particularly when you're working in co-production. There's also that vision of, and I really learned this lesson when I was doing the fuller stock take, where we were working with communities and the public and people working in clinical professions within primary care. And then there's this real feeling of like we're both going in these two different directions. And they both felt so aggrieved, but actually they both wanted the same things. And they both were in it together. And one of the key things that I try to articulate, and I still push for now, is there is no them and us. There is us and us. We need to do this together, otherwise we can't achieve that. And it also links to something, as you know, Donna, I'm really passionate about, which is personalization, which is, what's the matter with you, but what can we do to harness your potential and help you fulfill what it is that you want to do? Because quite often people are very intelligent, they know what they want, they're really capable. We just need to harness that instead of this patriarchal doing to mechanism that we just seem to really do. And you also mentioned the power of children and young people. I think children and young people, as well as being 20% of our current population and 100% of our future, are the best naggers in the world. So if you want me to do anything, tell my kids, and they will make sure mummy does it, because they will until I've done it. Mum, have you done this? Mum, have you done that? Mum, do you know you need to do this? And that's incredible. But when you speak to our children and young people right now, they feel so unheard. They feel so forgotten and sort of on the peripheries of society. And actually, we do need to harness their skill set, their abilities, and what we're doing to a post-COVID Gen Z world, because they operate in a completely different way. And Project Hope that we launched a couple of weeks ago, which works with looked after children, but also the program we've got advocating for children and young people, are incredible examples of work that is positive, but we've still got a really, really long way to go. And then the final bit, which I really loved, was we never talk about the cold hard cash and why actually there is a business financial reason for why we need to do this. So, incentivizing human behavior, design by demand, are all concepts that we all know about, but sadly don't always harness. And then there's also, and this is why I loved the vision of the two hands shaking, because it's a two-way deal, isn't it? It's the I'm going to do this and you're going to do that, which is sort of the basic of human behaviors. But actually, sometimes we're too scared to explore. So there's so much in there, Donna, but I think it's incredible. But Pam, your role as a trade union convener requires a lot of brokerage. There's a lot of time where you're having to facilitate and enable conversations that are emotive, conversations that are challenging, that are emotionally charged. How do you navigate some of that complexity and challenge to enable both parties to feel like they've got a good outcome despite the challenges? Because that's a really hard thing, girl. I don't think people fully appreciate how skilled the job is.
Yeah, it's hard, yeah. But I mean, ultimately, I mean, I look at it that when I'm negotiating with management, we're aiming for the same goal. We're just coming at it from different angles. You know, they'll be looking at it from an employer's perspective. I'll be looking at it from an employee's perspective. And quite often you say, put yourself in their shoes. If that was happening to me, what would I want doing? And my ethos is I will never ask somebody to do something I won't do myself. You know, if I when I first got involved in the trade union movement, for example, my brother asked me why are you getting involved? And I said, well, if I can't fight for myself, I can't expect somebody else to fight for me. So I think that's you need to look to see what the outcome is to be. And then broker that deal backwards and forwards. And there are times, like you've said before, that is when we're going to have to disagree, and then we agree to disagree. You know, because we're never going to come to an agreement. I must admit, with the combined authority, 99% of the time we get that goal where we are. But there are times where we disagree. And we'll go away and we're renegotiating, and you keep renegotiating until you get what you want or you come to a common goal. And I think that's the bit where sometimes you find that you're pushing at an open door anyway, and it's just like putting obstacles in your way to get to that fully open door.
I mean, again, some amazing nuggets of wisdom. The first thing I think, and I would say this to anybody who is advocating for lived experience, and it was a lesson that took me a really long time to learn, because I did think for a really long part of my career that there was someone in a really dark room somewhere trying to ruin my life. And it made me so angry that whenever I was trying to advocate for the change, it would impact my message, because my frustration would come through in the way that I was speaking, and people wouldn't hear what I was saying because they were distracted by the way I was talking. So I think that's a really, really important message of we're all united behind the same thing. We are trying to do the same thing. Focus on what we have got in common rather than what we've got divided. And you said something that I really think we've lost, and I'm going to say it again because I've already said it once, but I think people need to hear it a few times before it resonates. We've lost the ability as a society, I think, to agree to disagree. So as much as I adore all of you, there will be things that we will not agree on, but that's okay. And that's kind of what you guys do, right? You know, you broker stuff, and sometimes you will agree to disagree, but we need to bring that back. And I sadly feel that we haven't always. The other bit you described is really interesting, what you said about when you told your brother and his reaction of, oh, are you sure you want to do that? Because, you know, when I first met you, I was really surprised that you were the first person I'd met from an ethnically diverse background in this vocation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the reason is people already feel, and I genuinely feel this, that when you advocate for equality, it comes with personal and professional risk. You know, you're out there, you're visible, people are going to come for you whether you like it or not. And then you've got an additional layer to that too. That must be so hard, right?
Yeah, I think with me is if you tell me, no, you can't do something, I'm more determined to do it and prove you wrong that, yes, I can do it. You know, and yes, I got that from my brother, but trade unionism's in my blood. My grandfather was a freedom fighter, a prisoner of war, you know, and I didn't know that until recently that he was a prisoner of war, and I just think it's in my blood.
Yeah.
And like I say, I wouldn't expect somebody to do something for me that I won't do for myself. But you're right, in the South Asian culture, you don't often see women or in this sort of position. And it's like, why? You should be at home, you know, looking after the house, looking after the children. Why are you going out to work? I certainly got that when I started to work. It's like, well, why are you going out to work? You should be at home. And it's like, do you know what? My parents did not educate me to be sat at home behind a cooker. not doing it. And I dug my heels in. And like I say, the more you tell me I can't do something, the more I'm determined to prove you wrong. And I want more to come up behind me. I want to leave that ladder there for, you know, more colleagues to follow up that ladder, not move to where I am and pull the ladder up behind me. No way. I want
And
more
that's
to
why
come
you
with me.
inspire me so much, Pam, because, you know, my mantra has always been, you go through the door, you keep it open, or you keep the ladder there, whichever metaphor you'd like to use. And sometimes that doesn't happen, let's be honest. There's also something about acknowledging that the challenge we get as visible leaders from ethnically diverse backgrounds comes from the communities of our heritage, as well as other parts of society. And that sort of two-way challenge can be so hard. But having peer support, like the relationship we have, I know I've really benefited from our relationship, and I hope that I've reciprocated at some point as well. Of like, you know, how do you navigate that challenge, and having role models that show you that it is possible is so important. But you know, I'm mindful that we're coming towards the end of our conversation, and there's just one more bit that I wanted to explore with all of you, which is, you know, advocating and using your lived experience for change can be so hard. It can create a real emotional load as well. And if you think about the world in which we're operating, it's already emotionally quite challenging. What advice would you give to somebody who's wanting to start a journey or is currently on a journey of advocating for change that has come from their own lived experience? What sort of one or two things would you encourage them to think about, Pam, as they start their journey?
I would say never give up, have a clear goal and keep on that road. Never give up.
Yeah, and you know, you're the embodiment of that tenacity
you.
and where it can take you.
Thank you.
Kate, I mean, I'm sure at some point of your journey, there have been times when you've wanted to give up. You're standing here with a smile on your face. What bits of advice would you like to give?
Well, wholeheartedly with Pam, don't give up. I think what you're describing, Fatima, is you know, any change, if it's actual change, is quite threatening to some people, because with the best will in the world, as human beings, we're creatures of habit, and we get used to the idea that we have power, or we have territory, or we have dominance, or whatever it is that we have. And so if somebody comes along and threatens that, it becomes a problem, and people do take that quite personally. And so your point about what would you say to somebody, I've said this to a number of people that have come to me and said, look, you know, I'm dealing with this. Why am I dealing with this? And I'm, you know, when you unpack it, it's basically you've got people who are frightened of that change. They're frightened, they're threatened, and they feel backed into a corner. And as that individual who's facing, you know, who's trying to navigate their way around the person that's putting up all kinds of blocks to the change, my advice is to be as honest and human as possible, while always remembering that nobody owns anything or any property or anybody. It's all about expectation and assumptions, because at the end of the day, you know, all of us have agreed to a set of systems that we abide by. And I'm not encouraging anyone to break the law, but at the same time, an awful lot of things have been inherited or have come through a set of education and training experiences to be the way they are. So for an individual who's trying to challenge that, you realize very quickly that it isn't just that individual that you're up against, it's the whole system. So it is about, back to Pam's point, it's about sticking with it and finding the friends that you can bring around you to give you the support to keep going, because it can be hard and it can be exhausting, but that's what we're here for, is to hold the space. Everybody needs to be holding the space to let people express the change that needs to come, especially the young people. I'm 100% behind what you're saying about young people. They so need a voice. Yeah.
Donna, follow that.
Such brilliant contributions. So like Pam, my dad was an ardent trade union convener, British Steel, and he kind of was, I'm adopted, and my dad really drummed it into me about fairness and equality from being like a baby in arms, really. And it's a blessing and a curse, isn't it, Pam? Because you want, you've got this drive, you've got this real kind of fervor, fire in your belly to get things right for and with people. But also it can be quite, I can't abide bullying. If I see bullying, it drives me around the bend. I have sleepless nights about people being bullied. So it's kind of with you to drive you on, but also can drag you down a bit sometimes with the weight of the worries of the world on your shoulders, sometimes a little bit. So my advice would be, as Kate just said, is build that rebel alliance of people who really also see the inequalities, really get those people around you, use them and let them use you to bolster each other up, hold each other up. Through what is a really worrying time, I think, for public services, for society at large. Our current models are broken. They need completely rebuilding, and we will not do it with just managing status quo. We need to be rebellious. We need to be that alliance together, and we need to hold each other up.
I mean, amazing, amazing. This time with you all has really, really flown, but it's got some amazing nuggets of wisdom. I hope that anyone that is listening to this conversation who is really struggling with, wanting to influence the change that they want to see in a society, like you said, Donna, which is really struggling with so many complexity and challenges, has got some real food for thought, and I hope and inspiration. And the theme that change is scary for people, and that when we're advocating for change, we've got to be cognizant of that. And that, sometimes when you work in a sector that is risk averse, having that constant is easier than, advocating for change. But if there's one thing we can guarantee in life, is that change is going to happen, whether we want it or not, because history has taught us that, hasn't it? And that, we've all got power, whether we believe in it or not, we've all got the power to advocate for fairness. And that you've all shared on your journeys that while it was scary and uncomfortable sometimes, you leaned into that discomfort and you advocated for fairness. And, Pam, we didn't get around to talking about the anti-racism charter that you were instrumental in creating. But advocating for fairness can lead to pivotal moments like that. And, you've all shown the art of the possible. There's also something about recognizing, and this was one of my lessons, that when you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere, it's not you, it's them. That was like my biggest epiphany. When you're in a world where you feel like, is it just me? Is it just me? It's not, it's them. And that they are conditioned by the system. So it's not really that they've got beef with you. It's really not. It's just that they're conditioned into a status quo and they need to go on a journey. And our jobs as lived experience change advocates is to support them to go on that journey with love and compassion, as well as a little bit of poking. And then there's something about really owning the honesty and the authenticity that you've all shared, because you've not changed as leaders as part of your journey. You've remained authentic to yourselves. You've remained honest to yourselves. You've realized that some of this responsibility that you have is also a privilege as well as a challenge, and you've owned that and harnessed it to lead really positive change. But the thing that I really was struck by was that no one owns everything, which I was like, yeah, that's really true. Like, we don't own everything. And when we're challenging the status quo, we're not advocating for something that they've got ownership of. They don't own it. We can change it. And the power of curiosity, of sort of saying, okay, so you feel like you've got ownership of this. You feel like this is something that you can control. Why do you think that? Like, where's that come from? And really sort of exploring that. But the biggest nugget that for me, and I'm going to take with, and it's really helped me in my whole journey, is the Rebel Alliance. And Donna, you'd be pleased to know that I have taken that phrase and I've spread it far and wide. because you do need a rebel alliance to keep you sane, right? Especially when you're in a world where you're the only person shouting and no one else is listening. So that rebel alliance of picking up the phone, having a team's conversation of, I feel like it's just me and the world's gone mad, and then going, yeah, it is, the world has gone mad, it's not you. I think is the most important message. So I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for sharing your honesty, your vulnerability, the challenges and the golden nuggets of wisdom, which I think are absolutely priceless. And I'm sure our listeners and watchers have really benefited from. But also to thank everyone that's tuned in to listen or watch this podcast today. And I hope that you found it as beneficial as I have, because there's lots of things I'll be pinching with pride. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you.
you.